I got to give my parents so much credit for how they raised us, man. They did such a great job in getting us to think differently. I think that's like Steve Jobs is credited with that, like think different, right? It's like, but ultimately, my parents just were kind of ahead of their time. They were homeschooling before homeschooling was cool. They were juicing before there was like juicing carrots and celery and ginger, like all that. They were like into that before there was like a juice store on every corner of the street now, right? It's like they were into all of that. Like a normal breakfast for us was like quinoa and like almond milk. And now that's like popular, right? To like, you got almond milk and coconut milk and all this stuff. So like my parents were just like hippies before being a hippie was cool, you know? And they were amazing, man. They were just great. So they really taught us, they didn't want the government impacting their kids at all. So they were like, we're homeschooling. But one of the great things about homeschooling is that they really did let us. I mean, I remember my mom sitting down with me and saying, here's your math book and here's the answer book. And then like, go do your math. And all my friends would be like, well, you just cheat, man. Like, just write in all the answers. But then what I didn't tell them was what my mom said after that. She's like, and if you cheat, you will do nothing but dig ditches the rest of your life. Bye. I'm leaving to go deal with 7 other kids that my mom had and homeschooled at home too. So you learn to like very easily like be very self-motivated. And so that was one of the biggest, I'm a huge proponent of homeschooling for that reason. I grew up very self-motivated. I wanted to become somebody. I wanted to be somebody. And I wanted to get attention. The other thing about growing up in a big family, for anybody who's listening who came up in a big family, is like, you don't get a lot of attention unless you do something very good or very bad. And so for me, it was like, how can I get attention? You know, because your parents' attention, who like you rely on growing up for like, you rely on their love and their attention for like survival. It's split a lot of ways, right? I'm not saying that as a ding against my parents at all. They just had a lot going on. They were trying to raise us. My dad was making 50, 60, 70 grand a year, and my mom was homeschooling us. So money talks was a big one, man. My mom was the queen of budgeting, as you had to be to raise 8 kids on 60 grand a year. And so she would have these ledgers, and she just taught it to us from a young age. So I definitely became a good saver. Another really like impactful moment of my life. I know a lot of people listening. Well, I don't know. It depends on how young your audience is. I think a lot of people listening will remember Y2K. I don't know, Cody, were you?
I was 4 years old, but we had listeners who are older than me.
All right, great.
I got you, Sam. I got you.
All right, Dustin. So like 20, you know, year 2000.
2000.
Like, yeah. No, I can't even say the year. I'm like, I don't remember. I was young too, man. I think we're similar ages, Cody. So I think, but my parents were basically like, they really bought into the idea that the computers were not going to be able to keep up. There was going to be this huge financial crash in the year 2000. And so we bought a generator like on 2 axles that would have run our entire house. We had guns, ammo. We had a whole basement of like 5-gallon buckets of food. We had water with like little drops of bleach in it. So it would like stay years, because evidently you put a couple drops of bleach, it like makes the water stay bad. I don't know, but like all this crazy stuff that I learned about doomsday prepping. And I bought a bunch of silver because my dad was like, silver is the only thing that's going to have value. And so I bought a bunch of silver, and I learned. So it taught me to save, and it taught me to kind of hoard, which that's not a good thing, but saving is a good thing, especially early on. And those were really valuable conversations. So then, yeah, man, fast forward, I got this opportunity. My mom put me in martial arts when I was young, 12, 13, because I needed self-discipline and confidence. I was allowed to have one sport. We were all allowed to have one sport, and it was soccer for me. And then it was martial arts. My mom kind of made the decision, said, you're doing martial arts. And I hated it until I met this super cute girl. And then I was like, Mom, maybe I'll go back to the martial arts thing. And she was like, and then I told her I met this girl, and she thought it was cute. So, but then when I was like, I was a couple years into my martial arts, I was somewhat close to my black belt, maybe like a year away. And my martial arts instructor comes to me and just like, Sam, do you ever want to like run a martial arts school and like do what I do? And I loved my instructor. I like idolized him. And I was like, yeah, sure. That'd be awesome. He's like, okay, I'm going to talk with your parents about selling you the school. And he's like, you join my instructor training program. And like, I was just like, someone's believing in me. I think that's all that's all we're looking for as adults, even these days. It's like just someone to be like, here's the next level for you. here's what you need to do, and here's how I'm going to help you. And so I try to do that to my team, moving forward. And I try to do that for people around me now because it was done for me and I'm so grateful for it. And anyway, my parents bought the schools in a small town. Like, we're not talking a huge business, right? We're talking a business grossing between $10,000 and $15,000 a month, maybe less sometimes, call it between $8,000 and $15,000 a month. But in a little town of 2,000 people, like 80 to 90 students. And like, my parents bought it. Like they were in, they loaned me $15,000 to buy this little school. And the rest is history, man. I can go in any direction you want from here, but like, that was a huge entrepreneurial, opportunity. And the best thing that he did was he hired me a consultant before he left. And that was the most amazing thing, to be able to do that.
So your parents give you the 15 grand to buy this thing. Remind everybody how old you are when you actually purchase it. And what does that look like is it just like a flip of the switch? Like, he's gone, you step in, you're running the place? Or what did that look like in those first few weeks as what sounds like a teenager who was bought a martial arts school?
Yeah, I was, man. I mean, it helped that I had been training in that school. So a lot of people already knew me, but I was 15. I remember because it was right before my 15th birthday that my parents gave him the money. So I was like 15 turning 16. And he stuck around for a while, but he was very removed from that point on. Like, he just removed himself. And so for me, it looked like spiking my hair so that I would look older and really just, I think if I would want the listeners to take away something though from this experience, it would be what I had at that point was people that believed in me. So like, my parents at that time found people that believed in me. So whether you're doing that yourselves or other people are finding people that are like, believe in you even more than you believe in yourself. That's the truth. These people were like, you can run a business. And I was like, no. And they're like, you can. I've seen people do it your age before. That was what my consultant was telling me. So you got to surround yourself with people like that. Shout out to my parents for helping me with that at that age. And the second thing was, with this little saying in martial arts, it was called fake it till you make it. Or another way my pastor puts it, he says, fake it till you feel it, or just like, there's all kinds of little ways to say that. But basically, like, I would go in and I would just pretend that I was the best martial arts instructor in the world. And we all have these different parts of our personalities. Don't let me preach too much on this, but this is a really powerful point that really helped me. We all have different parts of inside of ourselves. We have the scared part of us. We have the really confident part of us. And my martial arts instructor always taught me, he said, you could have the craziest, crappiest, terrible day. But when you walk into the martial arts school and you tie your belt on you, like, as soon as the knot is cinched, you are a black belt. Even if the belt around your waist is still white or yellow or you're orange or whatever, any of the myriad of other colors you can be in martial arts, like, it doesn't matter. Like, your identity changes. That's what I love about martial arts, is because it gives me, so I just kind of faked it. I used that principle and I just applied that principle to business and was like, spiky hair, I am 28 years old and I run a martial arts school. And I wasn't like incanting that so much as I was just like acting it. But again, I would have doubts as soon as I would leave the school. But when I would tie that belt tight, man, like, that's the first thing I'd do when I walk in. It was just like, boom. So having a ritual to kind of, as Tony Robbins would say, to get in state, right, as he calls it, or to get in that place where you're calling forth that like powerful part of you, Some people get crazy with this concept, man. I know people that name their different personalities inside of them. They'll be like, I did this for a while. I was like Wolverine, because that really resonated with me. Wolverine was the part of me that was like, rip shit open, break through any wall, do whatever it takes. And I would like call that part of me forth, because there was also Sammy Boy. And Sammy Boy was like the kid that was 15 and getting picked on, the kid that was 12 and getting picked on. And I'd be you hey, Sammy Boy, you don't need to come out right now. Like, because I'd be really, insecure and not, fearful and like, oh my gosh. And so it's really just calling forth the best parts of ourselves. Martial arts taught me that at a young age, and then I had to apply that in business. Justin, I'm not even sure that was the question you asked, but that's where my brain went with it.
I think you definitely answered the question. It sounds like it was a super transformative experience for you from a mindset perspective. Like, you kind of put on this different hat, you spike up the hair, you're now 28, you put on your Wolverine mask, and you're like, I'm going to do this thing. Right. From a tactical perspective, though, like what were some of the skills you were learning? Like, were you doing all the marketing? Were you doing the accounting, the bookkeeping? Like, as a 15-year-old, I feel like I wouldn't even know where to start, like to actually run a business. I see how you could maybe like just start teaching classes because you've been there for years at this point. But like, were you also running the different arms of the businesses, and what tactical skills were you picking up along the way?
Yeah, I was running all the different parts of the business. Wow. The tactical skills were so accounting. Like one thing that my instructor walked me through was how he did his QuickBooks. I mean, very basic understanding of QuickBooks. So I had a very basic understanding of QuickBooks. I could run a credit card processor. I could type in people's credit cards and run their cards. I mean, we had a CRM that kind of like kept track of students and things. That wasn't that hard to deal with. That's not true. Actually, we did not have a CRM when I first started. We have a CRM now. We had a 31-day slot. You ever seen those like things? There's like 31 slots, and then we would handwrite people's credit card numbers. It's probably illegal to do. Well, probably illegal to do now. Handwrite their credit card numbers and it'd be like, run it on the 15th of every month. Run their tuition payment or whatever, and I would just pull it up and manually type it in. It was crazy, but so that was tactical. I would say the biggest tactical skill that anybody can develop in life, and that really helped me, was the sales skills. You mentioned the marketing stuff, and that was absolutely 100% on me. And it was just the ability to talk to people, ask them to join my program, have an offer to give them. And I didn't have to develop all of those things, is the truth. I just had to follow the system that my consultant told me to do. And really, at that time, the system was nothing more than like, go out in as many parking lots as you possibly can. And as people are putting their groceries away, and I kid you not, this was the system. As people are putting the groceries away, you snap to attention. Like you get their attention by like, we're in full uniforms, right? Like, boom, like, and you bow to them. You just randomly bow to this person in a parking lot. This, by the way, this is responsible for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in business. This one strategy that I'm giving you guys, and be like, excuse me, sir, I'm doing a survey. Would you mind answering 3 quick questions for me? And they'll be like, yeah, sure, I guess. And obviously you get people that yell at you or like just don't even pay attention to you. And then you'd be like, which do you think is more important for children, confidence or discipline? And then you're just like leading them into like saying yes to martial arts, basically. What about adults? Physical fitness or self-defense? Which one's more important? And then, okay, my name is Sam. And third question is, I'm giving away a free guest pass to my school. Would you be willing? And it was literally, that was my only marketing strategy. It was that times as many times as I needed to do it until I got 5 appointments every day. My instructor was like, you go out, you get 5 appointments in 10 minutes. Great. You're off until your classes. If you don't, then you go and tell your classes, which are like 4 or 5 hours. And then you go after your classes, you get 5 appointments every day. And that was him. And by the way, when I tell that story, I still get like, because I would cry. I was young. I would literally go out. Someone would yell at me and be like, I don't want to take karate. And I'd be like, just go back into school, like, do the Wolverine thing or whatever. And then anyway.
Well, you're 15, you've got this business, and it sounds like it actually starts to take off, like it's being successful, and you're already been homeschooled. So like, it's not like it's out of the realm of the possible for you to be kind of doing a little bit of this, like letting it eke into your day, I guess, like into your normal 8-hour day. Whereas I think some students might be like kind of away from it and they're just at school.
Right.
It sounds like this maybe starts to blend into your normal life. Does it start to get to a point where you think, this is my career now, and like I'm not even thinking about college, I'm not thinking about anything else, like I am kind of already moving into the adult stage before I even graduate high school?
Yeah. So I want to be really clear. I didn't have a life other than karate once we bought the school. It was, that was my high school. My parents were like, okay, cool. Like, you're done. You don't have to do any more of these books we put on your desk. Like, you do this. But that's kind of, if anybody is familiar, if you guys are familiar with like the Montessori approach to learning, it's like, yeah, Cody, you're shaking. So like, it's like, you're trying to let the kids go towards their natural bent. So if they show, like, I had a brother, my older brother, oldest son in our family, he had a natural bent towards computers. He was more introverted. And the guy, like, he worked for Microsoft at like 18 years old. Like, had a really high paying job at Microsoft, like right when he got into college. Just because he was like, he had that bent, and my parents were just like, you do whatever you want. Like, you don't have to do, if you don't want to do science, like, don't do science. Literally. They were like, do all computer stuff. And that's controversial topic, but that's kind of that approach. And so that was my parents' approach too. So when I got to this, they're like, well, I guess Sam's going to be an entrepreneur. Like, go all in on entrepreneurship. There's a great book out there called Soar With Your Strengths. And it talks about the kind of the problems in our modern day education system, where it tries to make everybody good at everything instead of like allowing people to double down on stuff and just forget what they're bad at. So I do adhere to that because I've seen it work in my family, which is doubling down. So yeah, it was my life. When did it become a thing where I was like, this is my career? I think from the beginning. I think the whole reason I bought the school is because my instructor convinced my parents that this was going to be my career. And that's, by the way, as it stands right now, as of 2 weeks from this date, I have sold all my martial arts schools and the brand that I spent 15 years building. So like, it did not end up being my career forever. But it served me really well during that time. Guys, you should be interviewing my mom and dad because they could like have better answers for this. They'd be like, this is exactly what we were thinking but my dad, I've heard him on interviews before and he'll just be like, we really weren't. We just were like trusting. We were just trusting that this was going to work out for Sam. I think what happened, and this will be interesting for people to listen to. My dad had a doctorate, a doctorate, a master's, and 2 bachelor's degrees. So he'd been in school like a chunk of his life. And it wasn't like he was kind of like, Sam, I did all that, all this money, but it didn't get me where I really wanted to go. So like, I think that honestly helped him be more open to me going in a different direction than the academic, go to college, get a degree route. But that's definitely how my dad was raised. Like going to college for my dad was like a privilege.
And was your dad involved in martial arts? I know you guys actually published a book together. I don't know where that falls into the timeline, the modern day black belt, but like, how does that kind of fit into this whole picture?
Yeah, I'm so proud of the modern day black belt. It's my first ever published book, and my dad is the co-author of that. It's really our story about building. It's really our story about being. It's kind of the transformational story I was telling earlier. It's really how we think people could show up like a black belt in their families and their marriages, and even if they're not a black belt, but what it means to be that black belt, in life. And so that's really what that book is about. But my dad got his black belt from me, and which, by the way,
that's
coolest experience ever to do that and get your dad to like bow to you. I would mess with him in front of class. I'd be like, all right, dad, like bow to your instructor. If I give him a belt, I'd be like, all right, dad, bow one more time. just like just make him bow multiple times just playfully. And he thought it was funny too for a while. But so yeah, he got his black belt. He was a huge supporter. He loaned me the money. He was there. My dad is not an entrepreneur. I think that's one thing I've learned. I've tried to do entrepreneurial pursuits with my dad, and my dad just thinks very differently. He thinks in a very academic way, and our mindsets are just very opposite in a lot of ways. But I love him dearly. He's very successful in his own way. He's working on a book right now. He's published. Theology is really his gift that he wants to give to the world. He was a pastor for many, many years, got his doctorate of ministry. So an amazing dude.
Well, I was hoping to tie together 2 points that I heard. One was a little earlier on. You said you were in a smaller town, like of 2,000, but then you just mentioned having 15 schools. So I'm imagining you didn't open up all 15 of these schools in that one town. So how did that progression go? Like, how did you start to scale from one to multiple and branch out of your little local area?
Yeah, man. So I'll tell the story aspect of it, and if you want, I can share a couple lessons that I learned along the way. The story aspect of it is like I was in this tiny town, and then my brother. Then my mentor at the time was like, hey, you need to move to this bigger town because that's for more people. I was in Charlottesville, Virginia. It was like, when I say bigger, I mean like 60,000 people. So not big, but like bigger than 2,000. So I moved to Charlottesville, Virginia. And then I kind of like put my brother in charge of that school. And then I kind of removed myself from the day to day. And then I moved to Charlotte to buy 2 schools. I spent my life savings buying 2 schools in Charlotte that were already up, operational, ready to go. And then I built it there. Now, to be fair, I had 7 schools, 7 brick and mortar at our biggest, and then an online program, which I'm really proud of the online program. It taught students in 28 different states in the United States, all virtual training. They would fly in for their black belt test. It was something we developed over COVID that just really, really, really took off. And was a beautiful way to see people become black belts all around the United States. And I modeled it after like the mega church thing, where mega churches like have a broadcast location and they broadcast it out. That's how we do it now. So we had one location, we broadcasted it to all the brick and mortar schools and online. And it was a cool model it was a cool concept, and it worked. So that was really neat. I think some lessons that I learned about scaling are there's a big difference between, are you scaling for more money or are you scaling for your ego? And I laugh because in the martial arts industry, most people scale for ego. You actually can make you can arguably in the martial arts industry, because it's such a personality based business, if you are the personality, you can arguably make way more money. Like I've got a buddy who runs a school in Washington, D.C., one of the most successful schools in D.C., and actually top 1% in the whole United States. And for a while, we both had top 1% schools that were out of my schools. I had a top 1%er that was competing, and then we were competing back in fourth. But now he runs probably one of the most successful schools in the nation, and he arguably makes way more money than I did because I've made it running 7 schools. So I think I see this a lot with small business owners, right? Everybody's like, more houses equals more money, more locations equals more money, more, and it just doesn't. It just doesn't. It multiplies your problems and doesn't always multiply your profits. So that was a lesson. I think that's a really important thing. And in the martial art, my instructor, my business mentor was very transparent. He's like, if you want to scale, just be honest. You're scaling for your ego. You could probably make just as much money as if you doubled down in this. So I'm reading a book right now called 10X is easier than 2X. And it's the same concept. It's like, what are you cutting? What are you taking away to get more money? You're not adding. So that's a valuable lesson to learn before you go sign, a bunch more 7-year personally guaranteed commercial leases at anywhere from $7 to $10,000 a month that you can't really walk away from once you sign them. Like that stuff is hard to swallow, in your 20s. You're like signing these leases, right? And so you're like, all right. So that's a very tough lesson to learn. I'd say another lesson I learned along this path, man, is just to be really humble. I definitely was humbled many times by going in really cocky, thinking I could turn a school around and then bring them into our organization, and that rarely happened. And then martial arts taught me the value of people to anything that we do. Now martial arts, it's exaggerated because people, if you don't have people, you don't even have a business, because it's all people. Everything's people. You can't teach without people. You don't make a widget. You just make a feeling. And if you guys aren't good at creating a feeling for people when they come in, you suck at your job. People have to have a feeling of progression. And so martial arts business taught me how, if I focused on people and developing my leaders, then everything else will get taken care of. So that's kind of what I doubled down on.
So one thing we haven't talked about at all today is one of the main things that you focus on now, which is co-living. So I kind of want to weave that into this whole story. When did real estate start becoming a focus? I think, honestly, the first 15 minutes, we're talking about you age 15 and under, which might be a record. We haven't even stepped into your later teens at that point. I know you did get into real estate super, super early, but let's talk about co-living. I guess first, let's define co-living, and then talk about your experiences with it and how it helped you kind of supercharge your savings and your financial freedom.
Hey man, co-living is just a room rental strategy where you're renting rooms out of a house. It's a bunch of people living together. Some people call it shared housing. Some people call it room rental. Some people call it rent by the room. It's got a bunch of names, but that's ultimately all the same thing. I fell into it as a cheap way to live. I fell into it because I was used to living with a bunch of people, aka 8 siblings and 2 parents. I fell into it because I was a saver and I wanted to save as much money as I could. And I just realized it worked. And I realized that there was a demand for this. This was 13 years ago when I started this, 14 years ago. So now, fast forward, long story very short, now we've got some big tech companies, Bungalow, Pad Split, Common, kind of coming into the space, trying to make waves and trying to be there where Airbnb was in 2011, 2012, right? Because they see the need for affordable housing. And kudos to these companies. They're trying to literally solve affordable housing. So there's so many directions we could take the co-living conversation, but I think I'll just say 2 things about it that listeners need to really know about co-living. Regardless of whether or not you think people will live this way, which, by the way, that's the biggest thing. Like, people actually live that way? Like, people live in a room? Yes. All over the world, people do this, first of all. It's very common in Europe, very common in South America. And it's more common here. Now, Americans are a little bit more like, I want my gun and my house and you can't take it from me and I want my own, but we're getting used to the shared economy. Think Uber, think Airbnb. The shared economy is coming here. All Americans are getting used to it. Prices are higher. I went and bought a chicken breast the other day. I spent $10 on one chicken breast from Whole Foods. I don't know why. It was just like, I know prices have been increasing recently, but like, it was that moment. I was like, God damn. Like, this is for real. And I bought two. It was like $20 for two. I was like, man, this better. They were really good though. They were from Whole Foods. But they were like, my point in saying that is, you know, prices are increasing. So people are looking for cheaper options to live. Two things people need to know about co-living. Number one, it is helping people have affordable living in America. Hands down. U.S. Department for Housing and Urban Development came out and said, hey, we think co-living can solve affordable housing. People need to start making room for affordable housing via co-living. All the tenants of the close to 200 tenants that we have right now, like, it is helping the person that manages McDonald's, the person that puts your baggage on that airplane, you know, that makes $15-20 an hour, you know, the person that runs the smoothie shop that you love, that juice shop we were talking about earlier that's on every store corner. That person needs a place to live, and if they're not going to live with mom and dad, they can't afford an apartment, so they got to live in a room. And it's sad. I think a lot of the kickback I get is like, that's so sad. What kind of country do we live in anymore? And by the way, I'm more in tune with the we're running ads right now, so I see all the comments on my ads. So these are very fresh. All these like comebacks are very fresh in my mind. But someone commented today. They said, if the government's for it, I'm against it. I was like, there you go. That's a good one. But like that, but like, so people need to understand it truly is solving a huge issue. Whether like it is times thousands and thousands of room. Some people are choosing to live together. Some of it is from official co-living companies. Some of it's from just people sharing homes. Just live in my basement. I got a room above my garage. You want to live there? It's that type of stuff. And the second thing the second hat people need to wear is their investment hat. And you need to realize that if you're an investor in these strategies, you not only are solving a big problem, but you're tripling the rent. Great example. I've got a house I just launched. I just made it into an ad. It's like blasted all over Facebook right now. It would rent for $2,700. We turned it into a 10-bedroom house. I know, sounds crazy, but it's a beautiful 10-bedroom house. Like, I would live there. The common space is amazing. Like pool table and little egg chairs that you sit in and kind of swing in, and desks, and just super cool coffee area, and all high top tables, and like, it will rent for $8,525. So we're more than tripling what that house would do. So it's really, truly one of the few things out there right now in the investment world that's a win-win. Kind of went on a tangent with that. I'll let you guys ask the next question, but that's why I'm excited about it.
Well, you were just getting into kind of like how there are a lot of people who are choosing to live this way for different reasons, and people maybe from different countries have more of a background. What do you see as being like a strong demographic? Like, is there, is it kind of like the young professional? And if so, is there certain kind of amenities and things? Like, is there a way for people to think about how to organize their house and how to target the right kind of people who are the best fit for this?
Yeah, man, it's a tough question because there are a lot of fair housing rules that kind of restrict you from being able to target too many specifics on people. Now, can you kind of do it still and kind of undercover? Of course. But ultimately, I'll just tell you who we see a lot of in our homes. We see a lot of people under 40 that are single, no kids, and everybody's getting married later. That's a statistic that's very well known, right? People are having kids later, they're getting married later. And so, they need a place to live. They didn't get the six-figure job they wanted to. Instead, they got a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 job they wanted to, and now they don't want to spend $1,500 plus utilities on that studio apartment. They just don't want to, right? Because that's half of what they make, basically, after taxes, or more than half of what they make after taxes. So we're seeing a lot of just those people who can only afford this way to live. They're under 40, they got a job, and this is just how they're living. This is just life, right? They're running our stores that we walk into every day. And then we're seeing a kind of a new demographic that's popping up. Let's call it like 55, 60 plus. And those are people that are on a fixed income. Maybe their fixed income hasn't increased, but everything else has increased. So they're like, okay, let me try to find a better way to live. I don't mind compromising. I actually would prefer to live with people. Maybe they're divorced. Maybe their spouse left them. Maybe their spouse passed away. Something like that. But usually, this is not for couples, it's not for families. So we don't get a lot of that like 40 to 60 or maybe 35, just because those people usually, if they do, that's the stage of life. People are having kids and they're getting married and all of that. Now, in that age grade, that middle age range, what we usually get is people in transition. They're like, I am getting a divorce. Never thought my life would turn out this way. and I'm going to go stay in a house. I want some people around me. I don't want to go be alone. And I'm going to live here for 6 months to a year in transition. So in that middle age group, it's more about transition. And then it's more about long-term housing for kind of the two other ends of the age group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm sure the big question on every listener's mind is, how do I get non-problematic people into these rooms? So let's talk about whether it's the screening process, the right platforms. Like, how do you fill these rooms up with the quote-unquote right people?
Yeah, man, we have... So I want to just acknowledge the fact, Cody, it's a great question, that can be an issue. And that if you just let anybody in, I mean, this is true for any place you rent. If you just let anybody in, they're going to take crappy care of your place. But people need to know three things. One, what's great about co-living, some guy that's in my course, or no, he's consulting in my course. And he said that the main reason he went from single family houses, renting them out, to co-living wasn't even the money, even though it's like triple, quadruple the money. He's like, it was because his first single family house that he ever bought, the lady who rented it turned it into a strip club. And he was so upset. She legit turned it into a strip club. He didn't know about it for a year. And when he came in, it was just trashed. But there was a pole in the middle. He said, like, husbands from the neighborhood were just like randomly disappearing into this house. He tells it in the funniest way, man. It's funny. But he's like, what I love about co-living is I can enter the space whenever I want, because the common space is like public space. So you as the landlord can just walk in. And I know that sounds crazy, but that ability is pretty cool for some people. I think it's pretty cool. You have the ability to check on your asset, your $500,000 asset anytime you want. Whereas with a single family, like, you can't do that. You got to give notices and you got to have a reason to do it and blah, 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 depending on your state, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is you absolutely just have to do a great credit check, great background check. Like, are they a really great person in general? And you have to make your best determinant, based on that. Do they make 3 times the rent? I think that's key. These are fairly small amounts. So if it's $800 for a room, then you make $2,400 a month. So yeah, it's not a ton of money, but still. And then the last thing is you need them to understand what they're getting into. And to me, what that means is having sort of an interview process with them. We do an interview process. We give them a little video to watch that explains the concept. And then we interview them. We're like, this is a no drug, no party, good old people supporting each other, encouraging each other in life to like do better and like have a cool place to live. You in for that? Or is that not, and then we'll interview them. What's a day in the life look like for you? We'll actually have a little application process. And so I think if you do those 3 things, I don't know if that was even 3 things, but if you do those things, that's really important. The bonus thing that we just started doing is like, when someone does have a complaint against another tenant, and that will happen in this arrangement, we have this QR code that they scan from the refrigerator, and it's a conflict resolution flow is what it is. What's your issue? Please describe your issue. And our goal is to try to make it hard enough, but also like, have you talked with Johnny about the problem? If so, what did he say? And it kind of like it's a big Google form is really all it is. It's a Google form that walks them through the issue. And then it populates to our spreadsheet where we can be like, we can look at the issue and see if they've actually see how serious it is or whatever. But, just that's a system that we have in place, and we will mediate sometimes. And we are not hesitant to evict if we need to. So that's a key point as well. If someone's causing a lot of issues, you just got to let them go.
I'm really curious about the actual space. Like you just mentioned, turning something into 10 bedrooms. So if you go out, and I'm assuming, you bought this house that did not have 10 bedrooms originally, you're adding up walls, that sort of thing. Are there, and this is probably very state dependent, but like, are you having to go through a whole lot of process to make a house that way? Or to be allowed to put that many bedrooms? And then the other place my brain goes is if you decide, this co-living thing is not for me and I'm ready to sell it, it's probably a kind of a weird place to sell, like a place with 10 rooms. So I don't know if you've ever had to go through that process, like to turn around and try to sell that back to the public.
Converting them to converting a normal single family house to co-living is not as hard as you would think. It's walls, it is doors, and it's maybe a bathroom. And so it's not that hard. And we used to do a lot of closets, and we still do closets, but now we've started using armoires, which are these like pre-made IKEA closets, you know, with the doors. You kind of see them in hotels a lot of time with the doors. You hang up your stuff and you got a few drawers. Now, sometimes we will add closets, but we'll use those armoires as well. So that's less like framing and studs and less permanent things. If you guys want me to, I did just pull up. I can show you that last 10-bedroom house, a couple pictures, not even a video. I can just scroll through some pictures if you want people to see it. But if not, it's fine too. When you go to sell it, there's two options. You can convert it back to a single family house, which would involve punching out those doors, opening up the doorways again. And that would take some doing, not a tremendous amount of doing, but that would take some doing. The other option is that there are marketplaces for co-living properties. So, you know, if it's in a good location and has tenants, you can sell it as a cash flowing asset. And so I don't think I'll ever sell a home as a single family home anymore. Now, I have sold off some of my smaller ones as single family homes because no one would have bought them. They were like when I thought I could only do 3 people to a home or 4 people to a home. But some of these bigger ones that are kind of like set up for this, I would just sell them to another co-living investor. And PadSplit is the biggest company. You go to padsplit.com/marketplace, you can buy co-living homes like as an investor, and they're cash flowing great, you know?
And so that's my, that was part of my original question, not where you can purchase co-living homes, but like, where are you listing these places? Like, is there a certain platform that you love? Is it like Facebook, Craigslist? Like, are you just hammering all of the listing areas? Like, where have you found the most success?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 20 to 25 platforms you can list a room on.
Oh, wow.
And we have a whole list of it. I don't even remember them all off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, it's Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Zillow, HotPads, Trulia, Roomster, Roomies, Zumper. Those are the ones that are coming to my mind. My property manager could probably rattle off 10 more right now. Like Google Ads, we have a big enough operation. We run Google Ads, and those work. So there's a lot of places. It's all the places you would rent like an apartment. You would list an apartment for rent. You just risk. Here's the hack. Go to your city. If you're looking to do this and you want to know what platforms you should list on, go to your city. So Cody, you're in Austin?
I'm in Central Massachusetts. Justin's in Austin.
Okay, Justin, you're in Austin. You're in Central Mass. Okay, so go to Central Mass, whatever city you're in Central Mass, Cody, and just type in room for rent, you know, whatever the city is, intercity. And then whatever comes up on the first 2 pages, that's where you list, because that's already what's being optimized for people looking for rooms for rent.
I got Roomies and Sertru. Not sure how to say it.
Dude, there's some weird new ones coming up right now. Like everybody's trying to be a platform for room rentals. For real.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
And somebody trying to get their head wrapped around this, if it's something they're thinking they may want to do from an investor standpoint, what are some of the maybe similarities, differences with, say, an Airbnb? I think most people are really familiar with that short-term rental. Is it similar in the terms of like amenities, like you're going to provide the towels and toilet paper and soap and things like that, or what are some of those tactical pieces?
Yeah, we don't provide anything, is the truth, inside the house except for a furnished common area.
Okay.
So it's yet we do pay utilities. So I think that's the balance. That's the combination of like that's the marriage between these two, right? You've got I'm sort of paying for some stuff, but I'm not paying for everything you would pay for in a short-term rental, if that makes sense. So yeah, basically what you're responsible for is furnished common area, utilities, and then we have a little system. It's on the fridge. People contribute to buying the stuff. But honestly, it's just a self-organized system. It's just a self-organized system, yeah.
What's different about like the legal side of things? So like lease agreements, I guess, what are some of the big differences between like a long-term rental and, you know, you could have a long-term tenant. I'm guessing you probably have some people who have been renting a room for years at this point, but how does kind of the structure of the lease work? Like, obviously, if they're in an entire home, like it's like, oh, like these are the certain things that you can do and can't do, and like here's what we're responsible for, here's what you're responsible for. What are some of those key differences that you're seeing in room rentals when you're doing co-living?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's 2 answers to this question to handle a co-living legally. The first way is like what actually just ends up working is if your home is kept very well and just as nice, if not nicer than every other home in the neighborhood. If your home has good parking, like if you didn't just assume everybody, like if it's got enough parking for everybody, then what's going to happen is you're not going to have any issues, 90% of the time, because, and if you vet your tenants well. So those are the key elements to having a great co-living house, just kind of run smoothly and nobody complains about it or anything. And then, yeah, you can just do leases, like a normal lease, a normal 12-month lease, except instead of on the whole house, it's on the room. And your lease needs to have a good, solid set of house rules, though, that you can evict for. So an addendum with house rules that you can evict for. That's the one key difference in maybe a co-living lease.
Okay.
Now, there are some regulations in certain towns, like, hey, you can only have so many unrelated people living together, blah, blah, blah. And so if you do get a zoning violation for that reason, then you kind of need to be protected in a different way. And the way that you're protected under those rules is you do something called membership agreements. I want you to think about like a fraternity club, or maybe like if you've ever gone into a place that isn't allowed to serve alcohol because they don't have an ABC license, but you have to buy that $1 membership. But then they can serve you because you're technically a member. You're not just a customer on the street that they're serving alcohol to. It's that concept for co-living. Now, it is more complicated than that, to be honest. But it is basically, you're saying, hey, these people are members of a club, and as members of that, maybe not even club's not even the right word to use. And I'm not a lawyer. I want to very clearly, I have a lawyer on my team to help handle this. I've talked directly with some of the lawyers from the largest companies that have thousands and thousands of rooms, and we've copied their model. And they do not get shut down. Like, they don't. That's just how I've actually asked them, one of the largest companies, I said, hey, have you ever been shut down by a zoning violation? And they're in like 35 cities. And he said, no, we've never been shut down. And he said, because of this, and this. And it's basically this concept of room rentals, of membership agreements. Sorry. And so if you use membership agreements correctly and you structure it in the right way, then that's the workaround. And again, I could go deeper into that if you guys want me to, but basically it's you're a member, and then you're a member of this LLC, and this LLC rents the home. And so in the United States, an LLC is considered one person. And so if an LLC, even if it has a bunch of members, if an LLC is renting a house, you're technically only leasing that house to one person, one company, one LLC. And that company just happens to have a lot of members that are members of that LLC that get to use the property. And you can't tell my members they can't use the property. It is in essence, that's a very high level view without getting too lawyer-esque. And I wouldn't even want to do that without the lawyers on here, but that's in essence how it works. and some people aren't going to be happy about that, just like they're not going to be happy about the Airbnb coming into their neighborhood. I get that. However, I think the thing that puts my mind at ease, and anybody listening to this should ponder, is this model is long-term tenants just enjoying sharing a place to live. Airbnb is a new party person every weekend. I mean, it can be, right? That's what Airbnb is trying to crack down on, but it can be a new party every weekend. And so I think that these are good for neighborhoods. I think this is helpful. This is great. This is a give back. This isn't somebody just partying and vacationing. I had one lady enroll in my course, and she said I was going to do Airbnbs, and I know they can cash flow great, and they can, some of them. She said, but I couldn't get myself to do it because I knew I was taking housing away from people who actually need it. Every house I bought and made an Airbnb, I knew that was a house that somebody could have lived in. And right now we're at a housing shortage for this segment of America. She goes, I'm doing co-living because it's going to give those people that housing back. I said, you go, let's go.
And you just mentioned the term, like, these are long-term tenants. And I know from speaking to a lot of people, that's one of the biggest keys is like getting people in there and then not having to deal with turnover over and over again. Like the longer you can keep a tenant in there, the better. So for what you've been seeing with this, how long do people generally stay? I mean, I could see some instances where it's a little more transitory, like, people are in a stage in life and then all of a sudden that changes, that they meet someone and they get ready to get their own place. But in general, what are you seeing for people staying in these?
Yeah, if you follow my model, now a lot of co-living companies are not quite to this length of stay yet, but my model is the model that I teach is very homey. Like a lot of co-living companies out there are trying to scale, and the only way they can scale is if this thing is like they just cut all the variables out. And so one of the variables that these co-living companies are starting to cut out is the common areas. They're saying we don't want common areas. And I just don't like that, right? I think you should have a common area. I think you should have an area where people can connect, even if that does, because they're like, oh, it causes problems. Somebody comes in, they'll sleep on the couch, da da da. And it can, but they need to get better at vetting their tenants, is the truth. Like, or figuring other systems around that. But I really like common spaces in the homes. And so I think according to the model that I do, they stay a lot longer. And so our average tenancy is over 20 months. So not quite 2 years, but we're talking a decent amount of time. Not coming in for a month and bailing, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking, they're coming, they're staying, they're living, they're enjoying, and this is home. And this is home. So we're trying to create a home, not just an affordable place to live, like a true home.
So just to like really kind of bird's eye view this and kind of bring this conversation full circle, like, what does your real estate portfolio look like now? I know you recently sold all of your martial arts gyms. Just like, how has, I guess, this style of life, these business decisions impacted you financially? I think I read somewhere that you basically hit financial freedom before your 30th birthday. Like, you no longer had to work, it became optional. So this is a financial independence podcast. So we'd just love to get those like high level numbers. If you want to share numbers or percentages or number of doors, whatever you're comfortable sharing, just to inspire the folks out there listening today.
Yeah. So I think the most inspirational thing that I could say is just like real estate. I'll just repeat what my mentor told me about real estate. He said, real estate is a slow grind. Like it does not start fast. It requires capital. And so for me, it was buying my first house, I guess back in 2010, 2011, maybe 2009. So, so it was like one property and then one property the next year and then one property the next year and then one property the next year. Until like, I think last year we bought like 12 or 14. So it's just like, it really can kind of expand if you take advantage of the appreciation of these properties. So we manage and own 200 doors. And I think out of those 200, maybe like 170 are ours, like my wife and I's that we own. And so keep in mind, doors in a co-living, like 5-10 rooms in a house, that's 10 doors. That's how I'm counting that. So it's like 34 houses. I don't know. I don't honestly keep up with it. So it's like 30 houses, and then we have 7 short-term rentals, and then we have I own a commercial building that one of my martial arts schools rents from. Well, it was my martial arts school. Now I just lease it to the people that own the school. And so that's kind of what my portfolio looks like. I was really able to accelerate a lot when I started selling homes. That was a really big lesson I learned, was like, I thought I would just hold them forever. And everybody tells you like, never sell real estate, like just hold it forever and it'll be worth a lot. Sometimes if you have a lot of equity in a home, you need to sell that home and redeploy it. If I can take the equity out of one home and redeploy it into 5 or 6, at least at our ages, like that's what we should be doing. Maybe if you're not 80, but like if you're our ages, like that's what you should be doing. You should be growing and expanding. And this is our season to do that in our life. That's what I believe. It's our season to take risks. We 3 of us could lose everything and we'd still be successful, right? Because we're young. So that's what it looks like right now. We probably, this is going to be a very round figure. It depends on if I have an HVAC unit go out or something. I mean, this number can change quite dramatically, but we're probably close to, I'll say this, we're probably be close somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 in net from the co-living stuff, which is pretty cool. So call it 20 to 25 a month or something like that. That can vary, and that's not a perfect number, but it does provide great. And that's in addition to like the appreciation and the depreciation and the principal pay down. I was talking with somebody the other day, and he was like, hey man, you have a lot of mortgages, right? I was like, yeah, we pay a lot. And he was like, do you know how much of that, all those mortgages are going towards principal? Like paying down the mortgage. I was like, no. And it was like way more. I think it was like $20,000 every month is going towards principal of loans. And I was like, that's cool, because that's like a hidden benefit. You don't even see that amount of money, right? So I was really, I think transparently, I was moving at a really fast rate. My business was doing really well. And then maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, my wife unfortunately had someone pass away in her family, and she got an inheritance. And so that inheritance, we put most of that right into co-living, which helped me accelerate really, really fast in the last couple of years. That's my transparent share. And my wife was very generous. She could have gone and blown that money on like stuff. It was her money. And she was like, I want to invest this in co-living. So I'm really grateful that she saw the value in it to invest in it too, because my wife has a mind of her own sometimes and does whatever she wants. So the fact that she was like, I want to put some money into CoLiving, I was like, let's go. So she's my wife's my biggest investor. But I've raised a little bit of capital for some other deals, but most of it's been money I've set aside and then pulled out of deals and things like that. So yeah, man, we're sitting in a really great place. We have a lot of equity in properties right now. I am trying to sell properties to pull that equity out, to redeploy. And that's a fun game to play. It's a really fun game to play.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for giving us the time. It's a really interesting concept. We've obviously had a lot of real estate people on the podcast, but this is a different way of thinking about it. And we hope listeners can, hear this and see another way in which maybe this fits their needs. And like you said, with some of the, the housing crisis things, like maybe this is a way they can get into real estate and also feel really good about it. So thank you for giving us some time today and walking us through this niche.
Yeah, man, you're welcome, guys. Great questions. You guys are a great duo together. I look forward to seeing where this podcast goes and where you two go. Keep up the great work, and thanks. Honored to be on. Thanks for the opportunity. And for anybody listening, keep up the good work. If they're following you guys, they're in good hands. And so I think that's the key, right? It's just following great people that care about them and believe in them.
And before we let you go, Sam, I know you mentioned some resources earlier, but where do you want to direct people? I know you have your own podcast that just launched. I know you mentioned that maybe you could shoot us a link of the 10-door property that you just listed. Like, what links do you want to share? Let people know where they can find you and consume some of your stuff and start this CoLiving thing.
Yeah, man. Instagram is probably the best way to follow me, and that's at Sam Wegert, SamWegert. So that's my name. And then if you just want to keep up with stuff I'm doing, if you're really interested and you're like, hey, this CoLiving thing is interesting to me, go jump in a 5-day challenge once a month or once every other month or so. We do these challenges where I just do 5 days of free content that people can really dive into the concept and learn how they can do it for themselves. And so they have to go to scaleyourrealestate.com, scaleyourrealestate.com, and get on the waiting list for the next challenge.